Hi there and welcome from Ventura, California to today's webinar, Best Practices Winning Webinar Strategies for Product Managers, sponsored and hosted by the 280 Group. Now, you're in the right place to learn concrete strategies on how to fast-track your career in product management. My name is Lori Dearman, Executive Webinar Producer with WebAttract, and I'll be your moderator and one of your hosts for today's session. Now, we've invited you along with over 400 other product management professionals spanning 10 countries across a variety of sectors. Now, our goal for today is to provide you with some fresh ideas on how successful product managers use webinars to inspire confidence and lead prospects to become advocates and customers for their products and services. Regardless of your industry or your affiliation, we're confident that you'll receive value from today's webinar. At this point in the program, I would like to go to our first poll. We'd like to hear from each of you. What best describes your company's offerings? Okay, looks like the majority of us are in B2B product with 62%, 38% saying B2B service, 17% B2C product, 15% B2C service, 5% saying other. At this point, I must say that I am very excited to bring on Brian Lawley, our host and sponsor for today's webinar. He's the CEO and founder of the 280 Group, the author of 5 best-selling product management books. Brian was the former president of the Silicon Valley Product Management Association. He's also the editor of the Optimal Product Management blog and newsletter, and also writes guest articles for publications such as the Software Development Forum newsletter, Softletter, and the SVPMA newsletter. We're extra excited as well to have formed a partnership with you to highlight the importance of using webinar best practices in the fields of product management and product marketing. So, hi Brian, how are you today? We'd love to see you there on the screen if you wouldn't mind turning your webcam on. And how are you from Los Gatos today?
Doing very well, thanks. Thanks for having the webinar, and we're very, very proud to be sponsoring it. We've formed a partnership with WebAttract. We did a webinar with them several weeks ago and got just an amazing set of results. Very, very high attendance and incredibly high satisfaction rates. I'd always thought that I knew everything I needed to know about how to put on a webinar, but working with WebAttract has convinced me that there is a real art and science to it, and I would highly encourage anyone who's listening to take a look at what they have to offer, because I've been very blown away by the results. So on to our content.
Okay, over to you, Brian.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the 280 Group, we're named after Highway 280 in Silicon Valley, and really our mission is to transform organizations and individuals so that you perform highly effective product management and product marketing based on our innovative and easily adopted optimal product process framework. And I believe that webinars are one of the most effective tools that a product manager can use and sort of have in their set of tricks. And so we'll be talking about how, as a product manager or product marketer today, you can use them more effectively, and then WebAttract will be giving you some examples. Just to give you a sense of what the audience background is, we asked about use cases. About a third of you are using webinars just for sales and product demos. 25% are using them for partner training. 21% are doing demand generation. And then about 23% are either investigating or not doing webinars. And I believe this is you're fundamentally underusing webinars if you're in product management or product marketing. Even looking at the statistics on here, there are a whole range of other things that you can use them for. They really are a great tool for product managers. We did a recent report that showed that almost all product managers, something like 78%, work more than 5 days a week. Most of them work 6 days a week. And so one of the things you can do to free up some of your time is to start getting some leverage with productivity tools like webinars. Since they're a one-to-many medium, they really help increase your productivity. Obviously, you can deliver them once, use them many times, record them, and the goal is to really free up your time so you can be strategic and get out of the tactical sort of weeds. And of course, if you can eliminate travel, that's a huge benefit. Oftentimes, as the product manager, you're the expert, or the product marketer, you're the expert, and your salespeople will want to bring you in and ask you to fly all around the world. And if you can do webinars, particularly with high-quality video, the way we're doing things today, that can eliminate a lot of your travel and a lot of your time spent on airplanes. One of the best things for using webinars for is getting salespeople up to speed. So delivering product presentations, doing role-playing, doing FAQs, and of course recording them and archiving them for later use is a tremendously useful thing to do. The other thing that I've seen people do is then to hire a transcriptionist who can then take the archive of the webinar and turn it into a written FAQ and a written script for your product presentation, etc. So that's a really good leveraged way to educate lots of people, present your product, and then also end up with some great selling tools. Of course, remote training, if you have to train customers or sales engineers or channel partners or support, webinars are a great vehicle for that as well. Getting your message out, and again, being able to record it so that people can watch it after the fact. If you have new people, new sales engineers or support people that come on board after you've already delivered the training, it's a very useful tool. And then last but not least is positioning yourself as a thought leader and creating demand generation. So the ability to showcase your expertise in your particular market, building credibility for yourself, for the company, engaging prospects, and really starting to build a relationship. And it can be a really invaluable tool because it's one of the ways that if you're able to position your company and your particular background so that you are viewed as a thought leader, you have a lot of credibility over your competitors, and you're much further down the sales cycle already. And with that, we're going to introduce Mike, the co-founder of WebAttract.
Absolutely, and it does give me great pleasure to bring on our featured speaker and webinar thought leader and author, Mike Agron. And after a successful career with such companies as Apple, Oracle, and MapInfo, he founded WebAttract, a professional services and training firm to help marketing and sales professionals excel at demand generation using webinars. Now, Mike is both the co-founder of WebAttract and our executive webinar producer, and as you can see, that's his real license plate there on the screen. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Mike on.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Brian, and the 280 Group, and everybody in the audience for attending. I couldn't be happier to be here. I'm really looking forward to spending the better part of this next hour with you. I've got a lot of great ideas I want to share. And one thing to mention, all of you who registered for this webinar may receive a complimentary copy of our book called Webinar Ready. It's a step-by-step guide on how to host successful webinars. It was co-authored, co-sponsored by Citrix. And the reason I bring that up is there's so many things I'm going to be talking about, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to drill down as deep as I'd like. But that book will be made available to you, and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. So I'm going to jump right in here to talk about what I hope you get out of today. And so I can fulfill that, I'm now going to take my webcam and turn it off, but Brian and I are going to bring it back for the Q&A. So today is for product managers responsible primarily with an interest in demand generation. Whether you're with an emerging or a global brand, as Lori said, I'm going to give you examples of how other product managers have used webinars in a demand generation sense to move their prospects through the toll gates and inspire confidence in their products and offerings. It's also a way for you to drive fresh new sales leads, to raise the awareness of your brand and thought leadership, and you'll be hearing examples of that. And really, today is for anybody who's involved in planning webinars and they're looking for better outcomes. So whether you're new to webinars or an old pro, my goal is for you to walk away with something that'll help you make your webinars even more effective. And I must tell you that we want to take as many questions as possible, so that will be your opportunity to ask whatever you have on your mind. First thing I'm going to do is go through setting the stage and talk about what are the best practices to optimize your outcomes, because you're going to be hearing 5 unique case studies where I will cover the best practices and metrics, and those 5 case studies are from the companies and the logos you see on the right. Some of them are global, some of them are emerging, some of them have been around for over 100 years like Underwriters Laboratories, but each had a unique way of using a webinar to promote their brand, their thought leadership, and drive sales. And then as I go through this, I'll be giving you some tips for pulling it all together. And then as I just mentioned, we really want to hear from you. The first thing in setting the stage is to recognize that all webinars are not created equal, and we use a lot of theater and theatrical metaphors because a webinar is a live production and it has a lot of the elements. And so in setting the stage, one of the most important things is to realize which of these outcomes are you trying to achieve. Are you trying to achieve a way to raise your brand awareness? Are you looking to promote your thought leadership? Or are you looking to drive sales? Often all 3 can be a factor, and today's research suggests that people are doing webinars as much for promoting thought leadership and raising awareness as for driving sales. But your challenge in doing a webinar is to really create an engaging event. You want to corral and spur people after the webinar to have a one-on-one conversation, to become your customer and advocate. During the webinar, it's a different objective. It's not about selling. That comes afterwards. And you generate leads and interest by delivering webinars that are engaging. And there's 3 parts of the webinar life cycle. The first is attracting the right audience, making sure there's something of value that they will learn. The second is engaging them, keeping them inspired. So they'll want to have a conversation with you afterwards, and then you can begin to convert and see who is sales ready, who isn't, who needs more nurturing. But in order to do that and to set the stage, I've come up with 3 myths. And if I was very pleased that the 280 group published this particular article that I wrote. And it really is, if I had to tell you what are the 3 things that I've learned in the years of doing webinars, it's these 3 myths. The first one that everybody thinks is just build it and they will come. Nothing could be further from the truth. Today, most of us realize we live in an online world. And statistically, a research project by Serious Decision says that 70% of B2B buyers want to do their research online before they even want to talk to us. Think about that. So we're constantly being evaluated. Webinars are a great way as part of that cycle to give people information. Now, if you look at the right of the screen, I have a retail store. And the reason I have that is it's no different than any of us who have walked into a retail store. We're not really sure if we want to buy something. We're just looking, and we're looking at the merchandise, and somebody pops out and jumps in front of us and says, "Hi, how may I help you?" And the first reaction is, "You know, you can't. I'm just looking. No thanks." That's so much of the way that things are done today. And the webinar is a great way to allow all of you to have the comfort and anonymity to sit back and take in the information. If you like it, great. If not, that's fine too. But webinars really become magnets for attracting prospects who are right to become your customers. And so if you're going to do a demand gen webinar, there's 2 states that people need to be in. The gentleman on the left, he's got questions. He's got pain points. He's looking for better outcomes. How can we demonstrate something to him that'll help him overcome those pain points? Or, like the lady on the right, she's actively looking for a solution. So this really says your topic needs to be a must-have, not a nice-to-have. People don't have time to attend a nice-to-have webinar. So if we can show them how to solve their pain points or get better outcomes, or if they're actively looking for something, they're perfect for our audience. But nobody wants to be sold. People want to be informed. One of the organizations that I follow a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you in the audience are familiar with them too, is the Content Marketing Institute. And they have really turned marketing on its ear. And they have a completely different view from a traditional way of marketing to content. If you look at the left-hand side of my screen, what a good webinar should be, a demand gen webinar, it should educate your buyers and make them more intelligent. That way they'll want to have an interest and you'll have a more profitable interaction with them. And if it's informational, it should be based on business value, around a case study, metrics, return on investment, best practices, lessons learned. And what you're going to see in these case studies, they were exactly that, as opposed to a sales pitch. It doesn't talk about the product. It doesn't talk about features or benefits or pricing. Leave that for after the webinar. That's when the selling begins.
Now, Mike, actually, I'm kind of at the end of my seat here. You know, that's a passionate point for me. And if you wouldn't mind, could I have a moment to
Absolutely.
just comment on that? Because
Sure.
I definitely don't want it to get glossed over, because when you get so close to your message, it really can be a challenge to discern whether your content is informational or if it's coming off as a sales pitch. So, if you want to have a little kind of a laundry list or a checklist, I call a litmus test, that you can ask yourself while you're listening to your content is, what will attendees walk away with? Are there any aha moments? One that I really like to ask myself and my speakers is, would someone pay to attend this? Even if your webinar is free, time is money. I mean, you're all here sharing your time with us, and if an attendee feels like your content is really a thinly veiled sales pitch, by the end of the webinar, they may feel deceived and they'll be less likely to want to continue the conversation. That trust is broken. So this is a really key point, informational versus sales pitch, and really take the time to dig in and make sure that there's value for your attendees to walk away with.
Thanks, Lori. The other part in drilling down on some of the best practices and setting the stage is that a good webinar, a good event, a good anything is well planned, and it's driven by solid content. And what we find today is that content that impacts a market that's going through a disruption or challenges in the industry or the business, and you'll see that in most of these examples, are wonderful sources of topics. Innovative solutions that overcome these pain points, and using a case study by thought leaders, and I'm going to talk about why thought leaders are so important, is another exciting, credible way. And the webinar allows you to take ordinary static content and tell a story beyond sound bites. White papers are terrific, research papers are great. They're all part of the buyer's journey, but the webinar lets you breathe life into it. And a successful demand generation webinar has measurable outcomes. There's demonstrable results. It's not pie in the sky. There's something specific. You're either going to show someone how they're going to get to market faster, cut their costs down, provide better customer service, and back it up with results. Now, I talked about thought leader. A gentleman, his name is Mitchell Levy. Some of you may be familiar with him. Mitchell Levy has put together a whole focus on thought leadership. In fact, he has a LinkedIn group, thought leadership group called Thought Leader Best Practices. Mitchell was the person that got us introduced to Brian, and he's really done a lot of research on this and got a lot of great ideas. But I love his definition of a thought leader. A thought leader is someone who is really recognized as an expert, and they seek your help. Think about it. Isn't that where we all want to be when we have our customer hat on or our sales hat? We want people to look at us as the experts. We want to be their key go-to person. And the reason that's so important is when it comes to picking themes for webinars, there's three that we have found to be the most effective. The first one is the case study that talks about business improvement. The example you see is a case study where Parker Aerospace talked about how they took advantage of existing workstations to do more simulation. And this was with HP and Intel, and how this came through building a workstation-based virtual cluster. Well, they had a whole story to tell about that. So they talked about business improvement. The next one is a how-to or a tutorial. This is a very popular type of webinar where you're providing information, you're giving people insights and best practices. The third, where thought leadership really comes in and allows you to amplify your thought leadership, is in the area of standards and compliance. There's so many different new standards and compliances that business needs to take care of, either to avoid citations and fines or worse off personal injury, things like that, that these are wonderful ways of communicating this information and keeping people in the know. And where you find great content, it's all over. case studies, as I mentioned, white papers, your clients, your partners, they've got wonderful things to share. Industry analysts, publishers, editors, authors, all of these people are great sources of content and can bring a lot to a webinar. So the second myth, after understanding that building it and they will come doesn't work, this is probably one of the biggest myths I see. People think because they're a great presenter, all they have to do is show up and wing it. Nothing, again, could be further from the truth. It takes a certain focus, particularly when you're doing a virtual event like this where I can't see anybody and all I have is my voice to connect. It takes a little different approach than what people normally do in a live situation. But the reason it works is because it's a time for storytelling. This picture here brings back memories to me and maybe to some of you. Maybe when you were younger and you went camping with your family and you'd sit around the campfire and you'd tell stories. It was just a lot of fun. And that's what a webinar can do too. It's an opportunity to tell stories. But I like to think of it as a radio show but with pictures, very much like we're doing today. So we have a little video, we have talk, but we mix it up and we use media to its advantage. But the most important thing and the reason why you cannot wing it and show up, it's your audience. Every one of you is the most important person on this call to Brian and Lori and myself. If you weren't here, we wouldn't be here. So we want to make sure that you get maximum value for spending time with us. Then the biggest myth is that people think, well, all attendees are sales ready and they're going to buy now. I wish that were the case. It's not. And you're going to hear some examples where that did happen, but that's not always the case. But there's different ways that webinars impact the bottom line. And to measure the effectiveness, I've listed 6 of them. Obviously, the first one on net new deals is pretty easy to justify a webinar if you close something. But it also can help you convert a prospect into a customer. If they see something in your solution or your approach that helps them solve a pain point or get a better outcome, they're going to be more interested in speaking with you. It's a great way to enable the opportunity to upsell and cross-sell to your existing base. You can increase your sales pipeline, and it puts you on the map as a viable player. That's one of the beautiful things about the internet and virtual meetings. You can be a small regional player and appear to be a global brand, and you're going to see an example of one of those in just a moment. Plus, it allows you to reach new markets and geographies. You know, last night I did a live webinar to Australia, and it was 8 o'clock our time and 1 p.m. their time today. And the coolest thing about it is I could reach all these people. Not only did I not have to get on an airplane or a car, I did it from the comfort of my home office. So there's lots of ways to measure webinar effectiveness. But probably one of the most important ones is, did it move the needle? And what you see here is a chart, and it's something that we do with one of our clients. And that is, at the end of the webinar, after they've been educated and received a lot of information, we ask them in a survey, after having attended today's webinar, did your plans to purchase or acquire products or services increase? And look at this. 47% said it increased. 24% said they were just researching, but now they intend to acquire. 24% also said they were just researching and see no need. 5% said they decreased. 71% of that audience was inspired to want to have a conversation after the webinar. I don't know of a product manager or anybody responsible for moving the needle who wouldn't kill to have that kind of information. And this is something that a demand gen webinar can do if you set it up right. The other thing that it allows you to do is to gather lifecycle intelligence and metrics across the lifecycle. When we talk about the lifecycle of attract, engage, and convert, there's so many things you can do before the event, during the event, and after the event that get you closer in creating a relationship to your prospects and clients. Much like Brian said, we learned a lot about your industries, the job functions, your interest. Very, very helpful. We see what's important to you in the polls. Just wonderful information. So now I want to shift gears into the 5 case studies. And this was really a lot of fun to put together. And it was kind of going through our greatest hits. I had to winnow it down from dozens to 5 that I thought would be the most representative. But I think the best way to tell the story is summed up by this quote from Mark Twain, which is one of my favorite quotes. He said, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead." So you'll bear with me as I go through these, but any one of these case studies could be a webinar in itself for an hour, for a day, or for a week. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Underwriters Laboratory. And probably there's no more iconic institution around than Underwriters Laboratory. They're a not-for-profit organization. They do safety testing. But they had a challenge. They wanted to raise their awareness. And they had a testing facility in Germany. It was underutilized. And they wanted to figure out a way, how could we drive more capacity, or how could we get more capacity and drive more business through it? And so we came up with the idea of talking about, how about a webinar on the benefits of thin wall plastics and how that drives demand. So what we did is we did a webinar, and it was called thin wall plastic. It was called testing of thin wall plastic materials and the thermoplastics testing center. And the thermoplastics testing center is where they wanted to drive people to. And so what was discussed was, why thin wall plastics? Why do you want them? But UL also wanted to show that they were a partner, not a barrier to their clients. And they wanted to show how to get to market faster. And so part of that was by having a very, very exciting client case study by a well-known company called PolyOne, where the product manager spoke about how partnering with UL got them to market faster, improved customer service, and gave them a competitive edge. There were very, very credible speakers, and I think that's an important part. Not only do you want speakers that are passionate, but you want speakers who bring credibility, and you'll see in these case studies there was always at least one external thought leader and one internal expert. And there were demonstrable outcomes, and there was a clear call to action. And part of that clear call to action was what they could do, but also to invite them to the next webinar. And so in looking at that, let's talk about some of the outcomes. 513 people registered, 263 attended, and that was an attendance ratio of 51%, which is very, very good. They were able to reach 25 countries, and this was a big benefit to them because this is where they didn't have resources. The average duration was 54 minutes. The satisfaction, as measured on an exit survey that Lori talked about, we always want to know on a scale of 1 to 5, how did we rate? How did the webinar come over? What could we have done better, so on and so forth. Very, very valuable feedback. Plus, there was actionable intelligence. And here is one of the cool things. During the webinar, we got 57% of the attendees on the spot to sign up for webinar number 2, which was held a month later, which was, now we go inside the thermoplastic testing center. So we set the stage with them why there was business value. Now we took them inside to show them how that would benefit them. The next case study that I'm going to give is another interesting company. This is a global company that has been around also for over 100 years. They're called Dex1. You may be familiar with them, but you may be more familiar with them when they were the R.H. Donnelly Company, the Yellow Page people. Think about it. This is an industry that is in serious disruption, and what they needed to do was to drive sales. They had to, as an established brand, reinvent themselves, and they had to find new leads in the changing small medium business market, which is their customers, which were either professionals as doctors and lawyers, or services like plumbers, contractors, so on and so forth. So what the decision was rather than talk about the products of Dex1, let's educate them. And we did about 15 webinars over a 2-year period on various topics, from how to use social media, how to use mobile websites, to give them a lot of information. This was a particular webinar we did called Sales Unstuck, how to get your sales growing fast. And we brought in a very well-known consultant, author, and entrepreneur by the name of Barry Maltz, who talked about selling strategies. He gave a tutorial, and his whole thing is this thing called the double helix trap. And what that basically means is, if you're a small medium business or any business, you have to balance your needs to sell and deliver. And if you don't, if you just do one or the other, your business is going to suffer. So he told the audience how they could break that. He gave them free tips, and one of the best things that he delivered was a sample email letter, how to get back into see accounts that didn't want to see you. And he talked about managing social media, and there was a clear call to action. Now, why this managing social media is interesting, you'll see the tie-in on the next slide. So what ended up happening is there were over 2,100 people that registered. 859 or 40% attended. The satisfaction was 92%. But here's the really neat thing. 171 of the attendees asked for a one-on-one meeting. We gave them that option. They wanted to have a one-on-one meeting with a DEX sales consultant to learn more about how this could help their business. And the reason this was so helpful is that we followed this through with post-webinar voice prospecting to talk to all these people, and it yielded these sales conversions or conversations to be able to talk about DEX One social media reputation management program, which was a beautiful tie-in that Barry made. I'm talking about social media. The next brand I'm going to talk about is a company called Novel, and they're a New York-based company. They were recently acquired by Elsevier. Some of you in the audience may be familiar with them. They provide analytic and online tools that engineers can use to develop better products. But they wanted to promote their thought leadership, and they realized that if they could educate engineers on timely topics that support the use of analytical and search tools, they would have something that would cause people to want to have a conversation. So one of the most interesting and best attended webinars was on compliance and standards. And it was about designing and verifying safety instrumented systems. They recruited 3 well-known authors, and they talked about best practices for compliance. And what they did is they empowered design engineers, and they talked about how they could use probabilistic computations to figure this out. And they provided them a roadmap. And there was an Ask the Experts panel, so there was just a lot of information. And additional credibility was given to the webinar because an additional sponsor was the ISA, who is very well known in these circles. And this provided a tremendous amount of follow-up. So here's another interesting fact about webinars and where you get value. And Brian talked about extending the shelf life. So we had 686 people register, 51% of 353 attended, again, reached 47 countries. Not everybody from these countries is going to attend live, but the satisfaction was 98%, tremendous value. There were 40 post-webinar follow-up sales that were scheduled immediately. But here's what happened that was particularly exciting. 781 people viewed the on-demand presentation after the webinar. Now look, we only had 686 registered. More people registered to view the on-demand. Of those, 617 were fresh new sales leads. Think about that. So they went way beyond just the 686 that was way beyond their house list. All these are fresh new leads. And 431 of those viewings happened within 6 weeks of the webinar. There was a lot of buzz around this and a lot of value. My next example is a pretty well-known global brand, Bosch. And I'm going to talk about Bosch Healthcare. I think everybody is familiar with Bosch, whether it's their dishwasher or the automotive parts. They're a huge company with a tremendous global reputation. But they wanted to promote their thought leadership because they have a product called Health Buddy, and more than focusing on the product, they wanted to talk about how they could educate and reach health-based decision makers on new reimbursement options for their product, which is a telehealth product. And I'll explain to you why this was so important. So the name of the webinar was called Advancing Remote Patient Monitoring Through New Coding Options. Now think about it. What industry has gone through more disruption than healthcare? I can't think of anything that is more disrupted. I mean, we read about it and hear about it almost 24/7. So what they did is they wanted to show what are called accountable care organizations or health plans how they could successfully use telehealth and code it to get reimbursed. They didn't invent the reimbursement codes, although they put a lot of thought leadership into them. There's nothing proprietary. But they wanted to show them how these codes from using telehealth could not only get better outcomes and better quality, but how they favorably impacted the medical loss ratio. And they were able to reach a diverse audience of decision makers and network physicians. Again, all of these were beyond their house list. And again, an industry expert and internal speaker presented. So it was not a sales commercial. It had an outside credible third party. What were the outcomes? 630 registered, 64% attended. The satisfaction was 89%. And here's what really was one of the nicest outcomes from this. It became and has now become a cornerstone of their content marketing at Robert Bosch. So the Bosch Webinar Health Leadership Series, which you can see the logo in the upper right-hand corner, we've delivered 4 out of 7, and they continue to educate and bring in a large audience. Now here's my last example. Now this is a company that's in New Jersey. It's a small company compared to the rest. It's called Mercer International. And they create an innovative methodology and product to help remove oil and solids for water. And they wanted to raise awareness on this. And we went out and we found people who had responsibility for environmental compliance, who are the decision makers, to educate why this is important. So the name of the webinar was Separating the Contenders from the Pretenders in the World of Oil-Water Separation. And what they did is they went beyond the status quo. They talked about trends and opportunities for doing this. Again, an industry expert and an internal speaker. And the case study was about the total cost of ownership on oil and water separation. But most importantly, it gave them ideas on best practices to be compliant, to avoid fines and citations. And they delivered on the invitation promises. So what were the outcomes? 146 registered, high degree of satisfaction. There was a lot of post-sale and nurturing. But here's my favorite footnote for any webinar we've ever done. Because of the webinar, they attracted someone who they had never met, who never knew who they were, and they were invited and successfully won a bid to provide their solution for the first U.S. nuclear facility to be built in over 3 decades, resulting in a 7-figure sale. So this was an over $1 million sale, all because of this webinar, because they addressed the pain points. They talked about better outcomes. So to sum up the key takeaways, the most important is in number 1. If you fail to plan, you really plan to fail. These are not just done haphazardly. It's like I said, you don't just build it and they will come and just show up and wing it. But all of these examples embrace disruption and change. They showed how this disruption and change could become an opportunity to master the confusion and show people how they could benefit. They all told a great story. They breathed life around static content, and they had passionate third-party experts and thought leaders. Number 5, give to get versus get to give. And what I mean here is, in the case of Dex in particular, they gave away a lot of free information, even though none of it could be monetized directly by them. But they gave it away, and that created a lot of interest from the attendees to want to learn more. And all of these webinars had a call to action before, during, and after. So in getting webinar ready as we describe it, a methodology with deadline-driven milestones and deliverables is absolutely essential, a set of best practices, and using metrics to measure your progress before, during, and after. All of these are covered in our book, Webinar Ready, which is yours for the asking, and I encourage you to look at it. If you do that and follow through on these kind of approaches, I'm absolutely confident that everyone on this call will be able to inspire confidence in your prospects to become your advocates and customers. And you'll be able to do 2 things. You'll meet or exceed your commercial outcomes, which is the graph on the left, and on the x-axis, add value to your audience. So Lori, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I think we have a quick poll, and then Brian and I are going to come on to start taking questions.
Yes, that we do. And speaking of inspiring, for this poll, we'd like to see if we've inspired you to look at webinars as a powerful demand generation tool. So if you wouldn't mind, based on what you learned today about using webinars for demand generation, which best describes you? Are you, in your mind, actively researching? Are you ready to add them to your marketing mix, already doing demand gen webinars, or maybe you fall into the bucket of demand gen webinars are not for you. I've got 32% actively researching, 21% ready to add them to marketing mix, 39% already doing demand gen webinars, and 7% still not convinced. Mike, wondering, what do you think of these results? Any surprises here?
I think it's great. I mean, I'm delighted to see that 53% are going to move into using webinars for demand gen, and I'm thrilled that 39% are already doing it. Those of you in the 7%, love to have a virtual cup of coffee with you and better understand why you don't think they're right for you, but that's open to everybody on this call too. So Lori, I think that was great. I think it's ready to bring Brian and I back to start taking some questions. So I'm going to bring my webcam back up on, and Brian, if you'll do the same.
I want to hit us with the first question that I'm pretty sure folks are thinking, and that is, how can we learn more and continue the conversation? So I'm going to start with you, Mike, if you want to share some resources with folks before we hit the questions.
Okay, let me bring that up. We would love to have you join the conversation with us. The first way is we have the on LinkedIn, the WebAttract webinar and webcast thought leadership group, where we share a lot of discussions. You know, our hero is Brian, of course, with the great LinkedIn group on 280, but more than welcome to join that. We have a lot of free resources with our ebooks. We have a blog, our website, we have best practice videos. There's probably something there for you. And one of the things we have quite a few presentations on SlideShare. One of the ones is called 6 Key Metrics That Impact Webinar Performance. I just basically skimmed the surface on that. That's yours. And another thing, we've partnered with the Online Marketing Institute, and we're soon going to be coming out with what we call crash courses to become a master webinar producer, to teach you what you need to do across the life cycle. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. Let me turn it over to you, Brian, and I'll have you give an overview on how people can continue the conversation with your organization.
Oh, absolutely. For those of you who are not already members, if you haven't joined the 280 group LinkedIn product management group, we have over 35,000 product management and product marketing professionals on it. Some great discussions, very useful job postings and other things. So please find that and join it. You can also just visit our website or email us at contact@280group.com. And the other thing I would encourage you to do is make sure you're on our mailing list. If you go to our website, you can sign up for free resources and get on the mailing list. And we have a very important webinar coming up called Optimizing Product Management at Your Company that you won't want to miss. Some strategies and tips and techniques for making product management dramatically more effective. And with that, let's go to the Q&A.
We're ready.
All right. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our first question, and going to go over to you, Brian. What's the best webinar solution for individual product managers and product marketing managers to use?
Well, that depends on a bunch of different factors. Obviously, budget being one, but GoToWebinar is what we're using today. It's extremely simple to use. The only limitation it has is it maxes out at 1,000 attendees. And if you'll be doing webinars with more than 1,000 attendees, then you probably will want to look at investing in something that's a little more pricey. But we've actually maxed that out once with one of our webinars. We had 1,001 people sign up. So the other solution that you might want to look at in Office 365. It now has built into the link messaging system. It now has the ability to deliver on-demand meetings and do screen sharing and a whole range of things. If you're an Office 365 subscriber, that's free. We do use Office 365 and Link at the 280 group, and it works pretty well. High quality on-demand video with screen sharing and the ability to just share certain applications and so on. So if you're using Office 365, that's a free alternative that's bundled in. Mike, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or suggestions around webinar technology and what people might want to take a look at.
Well, there's a lot of great platforms. Certainly, GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting is a platform we use quite a bit. Adobe Connect has some great solutions. ReadyTalk. BrightTalk, WebEx, On24. There's really no shortage of platforms out there, and it really depends on your use case, what you're going to be using it for. But I think you hit all the high points.
Yeah, for more advanced training, like when we deliver our optimal product management and product marketing course virtually, we do this for Cisco. We use WebEx, and Cisco owns WebEx, and it's a very advanced and very effective tool, particularly for online learning and more advanced applications. So you might want to start with something simpler and then work your way up to something like WebEx that is really full featured and is a great solution.
Okay, thank you. This one over to you, Mike. Guessing you've seen just about everything there is in the book. What are some top webinar blunders that you've seen that we should avoid?
We need to do another webinar on that. I think some of the top blunders that I sort of covered off. One of the big audio is the Achilles heel of all virtual events, and one of the biggest blunders is people are not properly mic'd, and actually they don't know it because they sound fine when they're speaking. But one of the blunders is using a speakerphone, and the reason that can be a problem is it creates a barrier between you and your audience, and it also doesn't have leaves a warmth out of your voice. Another is poor email techniques, not really coming up with a topic that is a must-have and not having a subject line that's going to grab someone's attention. Another one is death by PowerPoint. People don't want to have PowerPoint slides read to them. They want to hear from you. The presenter needs to be the focus and the center of the presentation. Not having a moderator to make sure that you have more of a dialogue than a monologue. Just having one person speaking can get old after a while. So having different voices like we try to do here. I think there's a lot of other blunders. In fact, you've inspired me. I think I'm going to republish some of my top 10 blunders. And Brian, with your permission, I'm going to put it on your blog as the first place. Okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are just some of them.
All right. Let's see here. I've got a question here from Dana. This one's for you, Mike, from Dana. I also love the poll slides. How do I incorporate those into my webinars?
Polls are a great tool to use as to keep the audience engaged, to allow the audience to participate and weigh in. So what we recommend is, and we did it here, do an icebreaker in the beginning. Make something that's easy, it's non-invasive, and allows the audience to weigh in. How do they feel? We asked a simple question. What type of product or service offering do you have? B2B, B2C, so on and so forth. So if you put that within, let's say, the first 2 or 3 minutes of the webinar, you get out of the gate, you do your housekeeping, ask that question. It gets people involved and engaged, and they feel that they're part of the conversation, which they should be. Then towards the end, as we like to know, okay, did we move the needle? Based upon what you learned today, how would you prioritize this, or what mattered to you? Think of those kind of questions where you're going to get very, very valuable feedback in real time that you can't get anywhere else. And hopefully that gives you an idea. And if you want to learn more of it, just drop me an email or give me a call. I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Okay. I've got questions coming in from 2 different people, but really about the same thing. And I think I'm going to pitch this over to Brian. So I'm going to try to merge the two questions. Are there any tips for getting salespeople up to speed?
Yeah, one thing that I've done very effectively with salespeople is, because they're mobile and they're constantly driving from one client or one prospect to the next, or one customer to the next, a great use of webinars is to record the webinar and just provide the audio itself, so that they can or to record an FAQ session as part of it, so that they can listen to it as they're on their way to the actual customer or prospect site. Oftentimes you as the product manager or product marketer are the real expert, and if a salesperson can hear you talking about the product the way that you speak about it, with your particular emphasis and the things that are most important, it can be really valuable. And it's a simple way to say, hey, here's 10 minutes. Pop this either a CD or send them an MP3 download, and say, just listen to this when you're driving to your next appointment. It'll get you up to speed really quickly and easily. So that's certainly one I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. Mike, Bill's asking, can you share what you see as one of the most exciting innovations in the webinar space?
Yeah, there's actually Bill. There's an emerging company out of New York called Hublished, and they've got three really innovative founders who are out of Rutgers and NYU. And what they've done is they've come up with something. It's not another webinar hosting platform. It's not marketing automation, but it integrates with marketing automation. It integrates with webinar hosting and lets you create very elegant landing pages, capture information, provide a way to host your videos, and give people a call to action. In fact, most of you who registered for today's webinar did so on the Hublished platform. I just think it's fantastic, and you know, I will, truth in lending, I am advising them on ways to add value to the market. I think it's absolutely one of the greatest things I've seen. In fact, quite frankly, I wish it had been around 6 years ago when I started, because it's going to automate all the repetitive tasks and give you an online instantaneous dashboard. So that's what I see as one of the most exciting things coming down.
Great.
All right, Mike, this one from David. Much of the great content today has been sales and marketing oriented. What about traditional product management functions with existing customers to present roadmaps, solicit input, learn pain points, etc.? Are there best practices for doing that?
Absolutely, yes. And really, David, what I expounded on today are the best practices for doing that. Whether or not you're looking to recruit and capture and attract a new prospect, for the existing ones, you want to nurture them and give them as much information. So being able to show them innovative ways on how you can solve their pain points or get better outcomes. In fact, I just have to share this real quickly. I got started doing webinars when I was a director or a managing director of business development, and I managed all of the partners for a company called MapInfo. And I realized that the resellers were not feeling the love. So I said, let's do a monthly webinar and we'll keep them in the know. And that was a fantastic way to educate them and give them tips and techniques. And we did the same thing that we're talking about here. So I would take all the best practices I'm talking about here, short of having to do the recruitment, and put them in. They're wonderful, wonderful techniques for you to increase your affinity with your existing base. Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing that I want to add is a really excellent way to use webinars is use them for customer roundtables. So schedule a monthly customer roundtable where you have, you know, a dozen of your most important customers, and where you're going to present usually a small amount of content, 5 to 7 slides. Here's what the roadmap looks like. Here's what's coming. Here are some of the priorities. Can we get your feedback, etc. It used to be that we do customer roundtables in person, but to be able to get customers to come on site, etc. You know, it's a nice thing to do, but it's very difficult to arrange. So perhaps do them in person once or twice a year, and then have the same group of customers just once a month for an hour. You know, pull together a customer roundtable webinar. Update on the product. Here's what you can expect to have coming. Here's what the roadmap looks like. Share your concerns, your opinions, your thoughts with us. So again, a way to be very, very productive.
Yeah, and Brian, to add to that, it's a perfect opportunity to use online polls, as we did here, to get people to vote. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? How important would this feature be? You're going to get instantaneous feedback that you couldn't get any other way. So yeah, those are great ways, Brian. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, great way to validate what your customers really want.
Right.
Okay, I've got one here for you, Mike. Lisa's asking, what's a good benchmark percentage for attended versus registered attendees?
There are two ways to measure that, but the number is approximately 40% of your attendees should have registered. And the reason I do 40% is some companies use 30% as their benchmark. We use 40, and the reason we use 40 is because it means you're targeting your audience to relate to the value proposition and the message. And if it's important enough, they will attend. So I would say 40% should be your floor. The gold standard for determining what kind of registration outcomes and attendance outcomes is using a metric I call the click-through ratio, and that's simply dividing the number of people that came to the landing page and dividing it by the number of people that registered. And so if you can get 25–30% conversion, you're probably going to get up to hit your registration outcomes, and you're probably going to get the type of 40% I'm talking about. If that number, if your click-through ratio is low and it's in it's in the teens, there's probably a problem. Those are some of the things that we look at, but I'd say 40%.
Yeah, the highest attendance that we ever got was on the webinar that we held that had 1,000 people, and we had over 600 people attend. But one of the great things that I discovered when working with WebAttract was they have the ability to, of course, host the webinars, the recorded webinars, but also really pull in some great metrics around how many people are watching the webinar after the fact. Because what you'll find is lots of people sign up for them, and then at the last minute, something comes up. As a product manager or a product marketer, there's always some kind of fire drill. However, if you're diligent about making sure people know where the recording is, you'll end up with a much higher percentage of people who actually watch the content and really benefit from it. Yep. And one of the big things that the 280 group learned from working with WebAttract is there's a huge amount of quantitative measurement that you can do that's really simple. Things like what's your attendance rate, but also where are people coming from, and as you go through it, it makes it much easier to fine-tune your webinars, to optimize them, and then also to share the results with your management and other folks to show the value of what you're doing.
Yep. And that all feeds back into the effectiveness of the webinar.
Yep. This next question, let's see. Over to Mike. Edward's asking, on average, for each hour of webinar, how much time is spent in preparation and how much time is spent in measuring results and follow-up?
The way we break it down is we break the webinar life cycle down ideally in 6 to 8 weeks from the time you say let's go to go live. And there are certain things that you have to do before, during, and after. But usually a good rule of thumb, Edward, is that for every live minute, you're going to need to invest an hour of time. Now that's including attracting the audience, developing the content, coaching your presenters, hosting it. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work. And I would say to your second part of your question on spending analyzing it, I think that's something that we do from the moment we execute a campaign. So 3 weeks before we go live, we start sending out our email blast, and we immediately at that moment start tracking how many people did the email get delivered to, how many people opened it, what was the percentage, what was the unsubscribe rate, how many people clicked on it, and then how many people registered. We go through a lot of these metrics and analysis on each touch point. So there's a lot of time that's spent before analyzing it, because it tells us, if we go 3 weeks in advance, it gives us an opportunity if we have to make a mid-course correction, if we have to tweak a subject line or do something. Sometimes we find that adding the third-party speaker in the subject line will boost the credibility and boost the open rate. So sometimes we'll do A/B testing. My answer to you is a lot of time is spent in the analysis, and that's one of the things that's absolutely essential. And I'm surprised that more people doing webinars don't spend time with metrics and analysis, because that'll tell you everything you need to know. And then after the webinar, we'll be taking all the information from today and understanding how did we do. What could we have done better? What did people like? So I'd say the analysis is the third leg of the stool, next to having a solid methodology and best practices.
Yeah, one thing I want to add, a lot of it has to do with whether your content is already created on the front end. When we worked with WebAttract, I already had the content, completely created. So we spent an hour or two working with them to optimize it to make it webinar ready. And we spent time doing a dry run and making sure that everything, all the technical details were in place, and everyone knew their parts. So it wasn't a huge investment if you already have the time, if you already have the content put together. And that was one of the benefits of us working with WebAttract is they handle basically all the rest of the details. And For those of you who follow our newsletter and my writing, I've been doing webinars literally for 10 years, and the quality level that we got having them handle all the details was dramatically higher, and the satisfaction was higher. So I personally, I'm a content expert, and having them handle the details of analysis, et cetera, and the reports that they provided were super useful. So if you have the content ready, then it's just a matter of, do you hire WebAttract or to run things, or do you build that expertise yourself to do the analysis and all the other portions? Just to give you a contrasting example, we did a webinar, I think it was about 3 months ago, and we did it on the ReadyTalk platform, which I can't really evaluate because I've only used it for this one instance, but for those of you who were on this webinar versus that webinar, everything that went wrong, that could have possibly gone wrong, did. The audio was horrible, the handoffs were horrible, and I've probably done 50 webinars at least in my life, and I thought I had it nailed. So we won't be doing webinars like that one anymore. So we've learned a tremendous amount working with Mike and his team.
Yeah, just to add to that, Brian, and to everybody in the audience, we live for great content, relevant information, and great speakers. Bring that to us or bring it to yourself, and you can package it and make just one heck of an impression on your audience. If you don't have good content, you don't have good speakers, what's the old saying, Brian, putting lipstick on a pig? Mm-hmm. It ain't going to happen. You really got to have good content and good speakers to connect with the audience.
Just want to go to this one to you, Brian. Do you have any other productivity tips for product managers other than utilizing webinars?
Yeah, this is a subject that I've actually done webinars on, and I'll be doing some in the near future on, because product managers inevitably are overwhelmed with requests. So there are a couple of different things. One of the things you should do is read through the Phenomenal Product Manager book that we're giving away for free, because it has a whole section on productivity. But simple things like when you set up a meeting, make it 30 minutes instead of an hour. And you'll be surprised, because 90% of your meetings you're able to accomplish everything in 30 minutes, and you've just freed up. Imagine taking all the meetings that are on your calendar for the next week and cutting them in half. All of a sudden you've got 5 to 10 hours of additional free time. But simple things like that, how do you process your email very rapidly so that you don't end up spending an hour or two a day reading emails. One of the rules in our 42 Rules of Product Management book is probably the most important thing for productivity, and that is that the rule is that the most important word for a product manager to know or to be able to say is no. And that's very difficult, because there are oftentimes important things that need to get done, but you as a product manager have to learn how to say no so that you can focus on what's really important as opposed to just urgent. So read the Phenomenal Product Manager. There's some great stuff in there, and make sure you're on our mailing list and for the next productivity webinar.
Okay, so at this point I'd like to invite speakers to leave us with any final comments. I'm going to start with you, Mike.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for attending and staying with us, and of course Brian, to you and to Matt of the 280 group. We really appreciate it. All I can tell you is this is a wonderful way to add to your marketing mix, to create new prospects that could become your advocates and customers, and it does work. And I invite you to read our book, to come to the website, and if you have any questions, I'm always happy to have a conversation. I'd love to help you be successful, because the more we're successful doing webinars, the better it is for everybody. And thanks so much for attending, and I can't wait till we do the next one of these. So I'll turn it back to you, Brian, to say some closing words.
Yeah, I just want to thank WebAttract for hosting yet another excellent webinar. Make sure you take advantage of the free resources. Their book is really useful, and I hope you get a lot out of the Phenomenal Product Manager as well. And with that, thanks everyone.
Okay. Special thanks to Terry Holland and Matt Lawley of the 280 Group for their behind-the-scenes collaboration and support making today possible. And most importantly, thank each one of you for joining us. This is your moderator, Lori Dearman, saying have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.